Brian.
Next in tonight's programme, we turn to the publication of the Ansbacher report due out on Saturday morning. A long-awaited report in which over 200 accounts held by individuals and companies have been scrutinised by inspectors appointed by the High Court. And at the heart of their inquiry, back-to-back accounts giving major tax advantages. So just how did the scheme operate?
There was a secret bank in Ireland that allowed people to stash money where the revenue commissioners couldn't get at it, and it was run by this guy who was one of the biggest businessmen of his generation.
Des Traynor, the secret of Des Traynor is of course, the central person in all of this. He was a person who was right at the heart of Irish commerce from the 1970s onwards, that he held very prominent positions in the semi-state sector. He was on a number of very high-profile boards, most, of course, particularly the board of Cement Roadstone Holdings, the company of which he later became chairman.
He was also Charles Haughey's financial advisor. He moved to Guinness and Mahon Bank after leaving Haughey's accountancy firm. It was here, at this bank, he developed an interest in offshore subsidiaries, which ultimately led him to setting up the Ansbacher operation.
The key issue is that this was an offshore bank that in fact was operating onshore. There were a lot of complicated book transactions, bank transactions, describing what happened to the money, but in another level, what happened to the money was quite simple. You might have a lot of money that you hadn't declared to the revenue, and you wanted to put it somewhere where the revenue would never get their hands on it, never find out about it. You gave it to Des Traynor, and he placed it on deposit in Guinness and Mahon Bank, or an Irish Intercontinental Bank, and it went into an account in the name of Ansbacher Cayman. So if the authorities came and looked at the books of that bank, they saw a lot of money there belonging to Ansbacher Cayman, and there was no mention of the real depositors who had given that money to Des Traynor.
The critical factors about all this are that it was completely unauthorised, it was secret, and the entity in the Cayman Islands, of course, had no authorisation whatever to operate in the Irish market. It was a scheme which essentially was set up to enable very high-profile people in the Irish community to evade tax and to do so over a long period of time.
You could ring him up and say, I want to make a withdrawal, call around to his offices. At one stage he was in Guinness and Mahon Bank and College Green. Later on in his career he was the chairman of Cement Roadstone, had offices on Fitzwilliam Square, and you could actually call around to his offices. Fitzwilliam Square, Cement Roadstone was one of the biggest manufacturing companies in Ireland. You walk into his office, you collect £10,000 in a brown paper envelope or whatever, put it in your briefcase and walk out. He was a walking bank.
This bank also operated an ingenious form of loan which allowed clients to borrow what was effectively their own money and claim corporate tax relief on those loans. Des Traynor was determined his clients should remain secret. His own records used codes rather than depositors' names, and in 1999 the High Court heard his former secretary regularly cut clients' names and other details out of correspondence.
There was a coded system, and that coded system was known to Mr. Traynor, obviously, principally, and also to Corey Collery, and to another banker, John Furrs, was a close associate of Des Traynor. And when an individual wanted to access his or her money, then they would go to Mr. Traynor. He would have a log where various coded references would correspond to people's accounts.
A lot of the records that were here in Ireland were kept in code. There were no names, and people were assigned codes. And furthermore, after Des Traynor died in 1994, a lot of the records which were here in Ireland were destroyed or removed back to the Cayman Islands.
This first emerged 5 years ago during the McCracken Tribunal, which is delving into the financial affairs of Mr. Haughey, and that it emerged over time that Mr. Haughey held accounts for his benefit in the Cayman Islands operation. And it was at that stage when the full detail of Ben Dunn's contributions to Mr. Haughey became known that the tribunal began to unravel. It unraveled his efforts to hide and conceal what he'd been doing. So it began to get into the classic money trail.
Mary Harney, then Minister for Enterprise, Trade and Employment, used her powers to appoint an authorised officer to investigate the Ansbacher deposits.
She learned more about what was going on. That officer drew up a list of 120 depositors. This was a confidential report, a highly confidential report. But on foot of that report in 1999, she went to the High Court and said, I'm so concerned about this that I think the High Court should appoint inspectors who have a very powerful role, who can go in and investigate what exactly is going on here. And furthermore, they could interview the customers and they could publish the report, or they could furnish the report to the High Court and it could publish the report.
Next Saturday morning, that report will be published, and the identity of the Ansbacher deposits concealed for so long will finally be revealed.